Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game. Alex.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, man. Good. How are you?
Good, good. Is this is recording? I see the little red recording dot.
That's
All right.
freaky, right? Gets you a bit nervous.
Well, usually there's like a waiting room beforehand, so you can like get out the pleasantries and be like, "Hey, how's it going?" You know.
I know, then I always find this like awkward when you press record after you've already had the pleasantries. Like, I feel like we should bring that up on stage.
We should. Definitely, considering everyone's watching this already. So
How is consensus?
Consensus was wildly busy. It was great. It was really great. I mean, it's the quality of projects at Consensus and Token 2049 almost make me not want to go to any other conference anymore. So, you know, there's an overload of conferences, to be fair. Consensus was wonderful.
And you were feeling like a little queasy before your trip, right? It was okay in the end?
Yeah. It was well, it wasn't before the trip really. It was actually, I got a stomach bug right after the trip. So that was really helpful that it was at least later. It's no, all good. It was a lot of work getting ready for Consensus because we basically got, it's not just the coordination of, having the booth and a fireside chat and organizing swag and organizing, meetings, but also we got everything running as an MVP for the fireside chat and live demo. And we did that live on stage in front of an audience. So we had to make sure that not only did our testnet work, the wallet works and available in the Chrome store, that we built 3 different dApps for specifically to show off like the MVPs during the demo. We only ended up using 2 of them basically. And then also had to migrate Maven Finance over to to Mavryk's testnet. So we had to make sure that we had like 4 working dApps.
And then it was all going to work on
and all the
stage.
infra. And it was all going to work on stage, yeah. So, and then
everything went smooth?
Everything went brilliantly smooth. And last minute, we had Sam. You've met him, our chief of staff. And so they were like, we're going to have to narrate what's going on. Yeah. His mustache worked really well in Texas, by the way. And so we had to, it turns out that I wasn't going to be able to control the demo live from stage just for some like last minute organizational things with them.
Okay.
They did everything though. I mean, the staff there was, the AV staff was remarkable. So then I had to narrate and Sam was back taking care of the demo live and we've never practiced that. So we were like, we had to really be in sync over what you're showing and narrating without ever having done a run through of doing that together. Thankfully, it went extremely smooth. So that was good.
Okay, just a little promo of what we're going to talk about today. I think the main focus is going to be on RWAs, real world assets, which is something that, I find fascinating and I haven't yet had the opportunity to really deep dive into on Beyond the Code. You showed me like a promo of equities, which was like a dApp on Mavryk that you were going to launch, which was sort of like a online listing platform for tokenizing homes and selling them. Was that one of the things that you guys launched at Consensus?
It's something that we gave a demo for at Consensus, and something that we're building in-house, but for a third party. And so it's not only for real estate. Equities is a multifaceted platform. It's basically a tokenization. It's a company that tokenizes assets, but it also has a primary offering and secondary market for them. So we feed assets into equities through a real world asset fund, kind of like a
one-stop shop for listing real world assets.
Basically, yeah.
Wow. So if I wanted to go on and sell my Rolex or tokenize my Rolex tomorrow, I could do that via equities.
Yeah. So it's not limited to real estate, although yield-bearing assets are going to be the low-hanging fruit of tokenization. Rolex theoretically, yes, but it's not going to be the primary assets we're going to be targeting at launch. And also another thing is that we are planning on allowing everybody to be able to tokenize their assets on their own. Although in the beginning, it's going to be assets that we feed into the system through an RWA fund. So it's going to have its own feeder, like a REIT that essentially feeds assets into the tokenization and then primary listing in the marketplace, and then the secondary trading of it. So we're going to be able to do the due diligence and ensure that the deals that are actually, one of the biggest problems with RWAs is, well, a few things. One of them is market immaturity.
I think we're jumping the gun because I really
We're
want to do
jumping.
this.
Yeah.
I want to
We're
do it in
jumping.
an organized fashion. So first of all, let's just backtrack big time. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you as a person? And let's talk a little bit about Mavryk and what you guys are doing. All right.
Who am I as a person? I'm a human being, the breed of Homo sapien. And my name is Alex Davis. I'm the founder of Mavryk Dynamics, and we're building the Mavryk network, layer one blockchain RWAs, and Maven. The Mavryk network, and a layer one blockchain for tokenizing RWAs, and Maven Finance, which is essentially a digital co-op banking system that's fully controlled by smart contracts. And previously, I was the chief innovation officer for the Tezos Blockchain's Israel office.
Cool. And I think like you spent quite a bit of time in Tezos, right? Like you started at the bottom and kind of grew your way up.
Yeah, it was actually really interesting. I started off taking care of a lot of the content marketing for one of the field offices. And then, of course, nothing wouldn't be crypto if there wasn't some drama. And then after that passed, they brought me on board as the head of innovation. So,
wow, was that your
really
first
flew
like
from
rodeo in crypto?
No, before that, I was a board advisor at Blockchain Israel, unfortunately, which was mostly it was more to like foster young startups as like a mini accelerator in the blockchain space. And unfortunately, a lot of that was in-person events and gatherings, and COVID kind of really
I feel
hampered that. Yeah.
Okay. So then you migrated from there over to Tezos and then started on content writing and then grew to become their head of innovation. And then how did you get from Tezos into Mavryk? Was that sprung out of Tezos?
Do you want the telenovela version or do you want the TLDR?
I want people to let's go with the telenovela version. I like a little gossip. Keep people listening.
So at my time at Tezos Israel, realized that we needed to, Tezos was looking to be the STO chain at the time. Back in the day, it was a time of high hopes. And pre the NFT burst, it was just past DeFi summer, and so without having really any DeFi apps on the chain, I set out to start one. And so that's where Maven Finance, which has been rebranded, it was previously called something else before. So currently Maven Finance, I founded that, where we decided to build a co-op bank, and the long-term goal is to provide mortgages for RWAs or lending on RWAs. So we put together a plan for creating a DAO that had the governance inspired by Tezos's proof of stake governance, and the lending from Aave that integrates the Oracle data system from Chainlink. And the governance system controls all the parameters of the DAO. So it's not controlled by the team. It's not controlled by, it's really a full DAO. So I set out to go raise capital for that. We put together a white paper. We started, building out on, the friends and family round of the capital that we raised.
While you were at Tezos?
It was concurrent at that same time. And then it was actually really, I tend to find things fall into place at the right timings in a way. And so just as we had raised our full round of capital for Maven, there started to be problems with the wider Tezos ecosystem entities, and they were consolidating things and moving them into a singular office. And so I stayed along to help my good buddy of mine who was running the show for it. Well, kind of helping them avoid the gaslighting that was going on internally. And we realized that after spending something close to like $200 million on on NFTs and kind of throwing DeFi under the rug that we need to leave. And that's really where when we decided it was like
$200 million in NFTs.
In the NFT sector,
and using NFTs as a tool for creating value on chain or for raising funds, like how?
No. It was invested into different sponsorships or investments, or and whether it was putting money into different companies or sponsoring sports teams or like events like Art Basel, for example, right? But then not being able to get questions answered or marketing support towards DeFi. It was constantly an uphill struggle. And so one of the things is we realized we needed to leave. And I tried. Typically we don't publish this story on Twitter as much. But I try to make a difference when I worked there, and then I try to make a difference when I was not working there. And it came to a realization of either we take Maven Finance to another chain, or we take this remarkable tech. I co-founded a fund along the way, and that fund has access to is backed by a significantly influential real estate investor. And so we had all the access to assets that we wanted to see on chain, and this digital co-op bank that we wanted to do lending on these assets that we bring on chain. We needed a blockchain to bring that to. And so it was either start a new blockchain or migrate Maven Finance. And that's how we got to the Mavryk network.
Okay, so you started your own blockchain in the form of Mavryk, and you migrated Maven over to Mavryk. Startup within a startup, so to speak. Cool.
Expansion.
So then you went full force on Mavryk with Maven taking a backseat.
I wouldn't call it taking a backseat. Every DApp is as successful as the network that it lives on. So, if we wanted to see the success of Maven, we needed to see the success of the network that it lives on. Mm-hmm. And that means, we had to have quality collateral to be used as borrowing on Maven. And that just didn't exist where we used to be. And so we looked at the field of every other blockchain, Ethereum, Solana, Near. At the beginning, the L2s weren't really a thing. I mean, they were just released, but they didn't grow to where we are today. And they still represent a lot of legal liability there. So I can get down that later. But we wanted to put Maven into an ecosystem that would be the future of RWAs. And we did not see that anywhere else. And so one of the factors there was, if you want to see your vision come forward, build it yourself.
So let's talk about RWAs for a minute. Why haven't they really kicked off until now? I mean, people have come to me so many times with these ideas for RWA-related products or platforms, and it always kind of peters out somewhere either between it becoming too complex on the legal side or becoming too costly. So in my experience, anybody who's tried has either failed or given up. I really do think that the RWA market is huge, and once somebody does figure it out, it's probably one of the best use cases for blockchain. But again, it hasn't really taken off to date. So how's Mavryk doing that differently?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of questions to be answered in there. So I'll start off with let me introduce RWAs as well for anybody who's watching this and doesn't know what they are. An RWA stands for a real world asset, which is a token that represents ownership over something, most likely in the real world. So take, for example, fractional ownership of a hotel, or fractional ownership of a house, or fractional ownership of a Rolex. It represents your legal ownership of it, as opposed to a cryptocurrency token, which doesn't necessarily represent your legal ownership over something. What has stopped RWAs from growing? So we saw with the RWAs are basically a reimagination of STOs back in the day, which stood for security token offering. Security tokens mostly failed, mostly in part due to a lack of market maturity, in my opinion. There was a lot of people, and even today, I mean, I had a call last week where people said to me, "Oh, well, we're going to turn it into an NFT, so it's not a security." I was like, that's not how this works. Like, yeah, that's adorable, But technically speaking, are you going to be supplying your? I don't want to go down the list of who it is because we might be working with them, but I was like, are you going to end up supplying revenue streams and a lot of I won't go down the product, but are you going to be
Basically,
supplying
is it
this
going to
for
be a
North Korea?
security or not? Right.
Well, yeah. And so, well, I use the analogy of the example of North Korea, and then they sat there like deer-eyed. I was like, yeah, think about that. Which presents a problem in DeFi, anyways. But to get back to RWAs, long story short, the market was immature. A lot of people thought that okay, if we just we can skirt these laws by turning it into a token, and we can fix all the problems of analog asset ownership by turning it into a token. Which in a lot of cases you can, but that doesn't stop that from turning into security. So on one side you've got market immaturity, on another side you don't have an actual ecosystem of assets. Let's say you tokenize this RWA, right? This was done in, I think it was 2019 with the Aspen Hotel, the St. Regis Aspen Resort in Colorado. And it worked well. Actually, it's on Tezos. And so
It worked well in the sense that it was successfully listed, or there was an actual demand.
There was the successful tokenization of the asset as a token, for starters, as a regulated product. Well, you have to.
No,
that's an accomplishment. You have to take it as it's an accomplishment.
It is an accomplishment. But again, if you create a if you create a marketplace but there's no market, what do you do? And I think that there's quite a few platforms that are struggling in that sense, like INX, for example, which we also discussed previously. So they managed to tokenize it.
I'm close to the INX team, and I've got my differences with strategy over RWAs, but not to belittle them in any way. But I do have different approach to what will drive the ecosystem forward. And so one of the other issues is now that you've tokenized this, right, like the Aspen Resort, now what? And eventually it got listed on T0, I think, but there wasn't a lot of liquidity. There's several problems once you actually tokenize an asset is, what can I do with it next? Can I sell it once it goes up in price in 2 years, right? It represents ownership of a hotel and real estate. Are there any benefits to owning it? Do I get dividends? Can I take a loan against it? And that environment does not exist on chain yet. That environment is still highly controlled with everybody who's building RWAs, building in silos. And so it kind of reminds me of like Linux or even like a Windows computer where technically you can build anything, but because no one builds in cooperation with one another, nothing functions properly, as opposed to an Apple-like approach where you've built in sync with one another or internally, right? And it works flawlessly. So that's another issue with RWAs where if you look at the current state of the market, everybody's on a different blockchain. And almost no app supports secondary trading, and almost no app has lending. Everything that's tokenized, it's on chain, but you can't really do anything with it, so you're stuck.
So what do you say that the biggest challenge is interoperability?
I think the biggest challenges are set by people rather than tech. Everyone focuses around tech for RWAs, when in reality, RWAs aren't meant to be within the gray zone of is it a security or not. It's very clear they're all securities. RWAs need a conducive interoperable environment to flourish. Because now you've tokenized this asset, you want to go get a lien against that asset. Every person who buys real estate, almost every real estate deal is not a cash deal. It uses a mortgage to leverage against their position. So if you just buy straight equity, you're not actually using your money in an efficient manner. So without lending on RWAs, you're essentially selling people pure equity without the ability to borrow against it. And if you don't have that, so Realty has tokenized $100 million worth of assets. They're on the, I have a lot of different differences, and I don't want to like slag off on the way different people build things because they move the needle when it comes to RWAs, but there's next to no lending there, and there's absolutely no secondary market. Also, they're
actually
on
like their model. I think they did a phenomenal job, at least a great first job. I bought a couple just for the user experience.
That's what I was saying though, is that, but there's no secondary market.
There's no secondary market,
and you're extraordinarily limited with the way that lending has been created.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I said is there are ways to better build the ecosystem as opposed to not. I'm saying this as a constructively critical point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And they've moved the needle there, really. In my opinion, Realty is the only real tokenization platform that has done something.
I agree.
Realty and Lofty that has done something meaningful. Because if you look at the tokenization, the RWA ecosystem today, and you look at DeFi Llama, it's $2 billion of RWAs are considered on Maker and on staked USDT, but they're not tradable. So did you really tokenize that RWA, or is it sitting in some analog container and that you've borrowed against this theoretical portfolio? It's not really an RWA token. There's no added benefit to the ecosystem. I can't go in and liquidate a position. That's another issue, is this building in silos.
Okay. So the challenges are clear. What is Mavryk doing different?
We're building
What are
the
all
ecosystem.
these guys doing wrong, and why are you guys going to fix the problem?
Well, for starters, we're not skirting around securities laws, right? Not turning something into an NFT and putting a bunny rabbit on it and calling it,
Okay, so you're calling a spade, which again, you're talking to a lawyer, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I gotta watch what I say here. So, we built a new RWA token standard that takes into account compliance rules and KYC, whitelist, blacklist, etc. So when a user actually wants to transact on a secondary market, the RWA dexes that we've built already understand how to work with that RWA contract. And so we're kind of setting a standardization for how to build on our chain. You don't have to use it, but if you like to play in this environment, you kind of have to. We built 3 different RWA dexes. One of them is an automated market maker, similar to Uniswap, but less volatile. Again, real estate is not as volatile as crypto, right? A limit order book exchange that is non-custodial. So it looks like a centralized exchange, but it functions like a decentralized exchange. We call it the Sexy Dex, like CEX, DEX.
You get an A for branding.
Thank you. And an OTC, so that'd be a simple, seller to buyer direct deal between the two. And all of those work in conjunction with the RWA token standard. So there's a compliance check before transfer, and it's a permissionless feeling environment for permissioned assets. Yeah,
it's before transfer or before purchase. Like you KYC people when you onboard them, or only when they want to transfer assets.
So we KYC people when they essentially update. Well, I want to say update, but there's a Mavryk wallet, and then there's the pro version of the Mavryk wallet. And so when they get the pro version, that's when they're KYC'd.
What's the difference between the non-pro and the pro?
The non-pro is your standard browser-based, a non-custodial, non-KYC wallet. And the pro version is just a KYC non-custodial wallet.
And the thinking behind that is that once it's KYC, there'll be a stronger market. Like, do you allow transfers for the non-KYC version? Why would I go pro?
You would go pro if you'd like to interact with any of the RWA assets or RWA dApps on the chain.
So you don't have access to RWA assets if you're just using the non-pro version. Okay.
Correct.
So it's basically
similar to what Centrifuge has done. I wouldn't say it's pro or nothing. I mean, if you want
to get the real benefits of the platform.
There are multiple platforms, so it really depends on what you're looking to do. That's kind of like saying if you don't KYC your MetaMask, is Ethereum, have any value to you as a user? There are elements that you need KYC for, and there are elements that you don't. So if you're just using DeFi or games or NFTs, you don't need to go through and KYC your wallet. If you'd like to go buy fractionalized real estate as a security and then go borrow against that on Maven, you would need to go through KYC just as you would any RWA platform. The difference is, as opposed to, Centrifuge has a walled garden. Once you're KYC by Centrifuge, you're inside their system. But you don't have, they're not bearer assets. So you're stuck inside their system. You can only sell when they want. I don't know if they have secondary markets. You can only borrow when they want. I don't believe they have lending. So with what we've built a walled ecosystem, like a walled garden, but an ecosystem, rather than a walled garden that is fully permissioned. So other people can come along.
You brought value within the garden. Basically, it's a walled garden, but you're not alone.
Correct. We're open sourcing everything we've built so that, once we've built that walled garden and we've launched the first set of dApps so that we have what to do on day one, someone else can come in and say, hey, look, I like this lending that you built with Maven, but I've got a different take on how to do lending. I want to offer extra leverage, or, Maven only offers 80% loan to value. I want to offer 90, and they can build their own dApp for lending on RWAs as long as they follow certain compliance measures, right? Because they are securities, but it's a walled garden ecosystem of value.
Got it. How are you integrating like compliance and regulation into all that? Because I mean, just from a bird's eye view, I can identify like a million different issues, and I'm sure that like it gets super complex.
It does get super complex when you think about the primary issuance of where is the asset going to be, like what security are you actually buying, right? Because you might be buying a hotel in the US, but the asset that you're buying is really a security out of, Gibraltar, Malta, Dubai, etc. So you might be buying a holding company in Dubai that owns an asset in the US.
So
And that gets
walk me through a potential example. I own a resort in the United States that is that is owned the same example as you just suggested. That's owned by a company in Israel, for example. Okay, and
if you wanted to pick the number one country
okay,
for
you know
problems of
what?
financial regulatory problems.
Or banking problems, anyways. Let's say,
Yeah.
okay, so I have a company in Cayman that owns a hotel in New York City. Okay,
So you're fractionalizing Caymans.
I'm fractionalizing Cayman stock, correct? But the Cayman company only owns this hotel in New York. So ultimately, I'm fractionalizing Cayman stock that's representative of an asset in New York City.
Mhm.
Walk me through the process, okay? I'm the sole owner of the Cayman company. I log into Mavryk's website and I want to go about tokenizing my company.
So you wouldn't. I mean, you could log into the website and you can talk to us. What we
I'm
do is we
saying,
joint
what does the
venture.
process look like? Is
Yeah,
it
yeah,
like
yeah.
a
Let me walk you through this. So Maverick
walk me through
Dynamics.
the listing side, okay? And then I want you to walk me through
Mhm.
the user side as if I was coming in and wanted to buy a piece of that fractionalized ownership.
Let's just give away our whole USP on the podcast while we're at it. So I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm playing with you. For starters, is Maverick Dynamics is a tech provider. We
Mm-hmm.
don't deal with the regulatory side of that in this case, right? We're offloading that to equities as a separate company. However,
Also owned by you? I'm saying
uh,
it's a separate
no,
company within the Maverick family,
it's a joint
or it's a
venture with a
third
private
party.
client.
Okay.
It's a joint venture with a private client where we're providing the tech. What would happen essentially is that we would work with the private client to change their articles of incorporation, all the corporate documents, to have the RWA token standard represent the ownership of that asset. And each jurisdiction is different. The Cayman has different laws than the US, different laws in Gibraltar, different laws in Dubai. So we have to fit that.
One second. I just want to explain to you why I'm grilling you. Ultimately, you want this to be like a wide scale platform for listing multiple assets, and you want it to be something that's like
Mm-hmm.
click and go to the greatest extent possible. So I just want to understand like how
No,
cumbersome the efforts are in the back.
actually,
No, you don't want it to be.
no. Each jurisdiction carries its own compliance rules and regulations. It's not going to be on day one as click and go as possible. And that
Okay.
leads to problems as you see with Lofty, where
Okay.
anybody can tokenize their assets on Lofty, but what you end up getting is basically fancy home equity lines, and you don't get due diligence over what deals that you put forward. Now,
Okay.
the dream is to have it click and go, but in order to start that avalanche, the snowball needs to start somewhere.
So are the assets vetted in a sense, or do you not look at the asset as whether or not it's a good or worthwhile investment? You're just
Of course we
walking
do.
through it from a
Yeah.
compliance perspective.
No. We do due diligence whether or not we actually want to work with the asset, managers that own this asset.
Mm-hmm.
B, is it going to be something that we believe will be value that brings additional value on chain? And C, if it's also it's like if it's like registered in a unfriendly jurisdiction, we might not want to either we might need to migrate it or we might not want to work with it. So or who they're targeting, because you get a lot of people who want to tokenize an asset, but they
Because it
don't
sucks.
they yeah, they're looking to sell it for a higher price than they really want to. But to answer the question, because we're deviating from the original, we're on a tangent from the original question.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, that asset would go into a holding company. That hold
Mm-hmm.
the equity of that holding company would be represented by a token contract. That token contract is then sold. We working with a broker dealer and depending on again jurisdictions, transfer agents, etc. with regulators and lawyers, that primary offering would be done in a centralized fashion because you've got a company selling equity to private investors. Then from there on the secondary trading, the compliance rules that token requires would be obviously at the mint of the token would be built into the token standard, as we've built in the compliance rules for that, like a compliance engine, essentially. The trading on the secondary market would be completely peer-to-peer in a non-custodial way. So we don't custody users' assets. We don't custody users' funds. The website for equities is on the secondary market for both the AMM and the sexy dex. I know it's a wonderful
It's awesome.
wonderful line. I got a sticker for it somewhere here. I'll show you. We handed out in consensus. So all of those exchanges for the RWAs are completely non-custodial. We don't hold users' assets at any point in time. They sit in their wallet.
That makes sense to me.
So the rules and regulations on secondary, like a private investor selling to private investor, completely different than if you custody a user's funds.
Private investor selling to private investor, but you don't actually have any control over that. Once it's listed on the platform, I can come in and I can buy the entire thing.
I mean, it depends on how you would do so, but yes.
Okay.
Because if you buy it out of the AMM, you'd spike the price. Which is why we have
unless I did it slowly, whatever. There's all
unless you got
kinds
it over
of ways
the OTC
of
contracts.
gaming the system. Yeah. Exactly. But I get the gist of it. From what price is it worthwhile to tokenize an asset? Because I imagine this is like a relatively arduous and expensive process. It requires a lot of hours from your team. The client will need to take their own counsel, or at least pay for some kind of counsel that works with you. This is not for like $60,000 homes in Detroit.
It's funny you say that exact example, because that's how it started.
Okay. I'm just drawing on that's exactly what it really started with.
Yeah. The expensive process is really setting the assembly line up in order to make sure that these assets have a streamlined process and flow to getting on chain. Once you do that, then it becomes a little bit more clear, and you amortize the costs over a wider range of assets. And you can also offset those costs, like the long tail of the asset ownership, with the revenue fees generated from the secondary market. So there's something to keep in mind about, and I really probably should have started with this. Just because you tokenize something doesn't mean that there's going to be instant liquidity. There's going to be
goes without saying.
Believe it or not, that's not true. Everybody believes they're like, oh, if you tokenize something, it's going to be liquid. You could sell it 24/7. It's going to be more liquid. It's not going to trade 24/7.
It might be tradable 24/7.
Correct.
But it might not be anybody. Again, it's a supply and demand question.
Right, and when you tokenize bad assets, as we've mostly seen so far, you're not going to get liquidity for that, because no one wants to buy garbage, right? And I think there's been a misconception in the RWA space, both on the legal and compliance side of things, but secondly on the nature of private equity. Private equity is naturally illiquid. So there will be increased liquidity, but it won't be this liquid thing like Bitcoin, where you got billions of dollars a day in liquidity trading on a REIT. It's just not going to happen. So you need to take that into account. So there's something else that's actually really interesting, going back to my point of like things happen at the right moment in time in history, like Bitcoin coming out just after the 2008 financial crisis. I think these things, you might call it a shkachaplat, but you think these things are, it's interesting how the world finds a way to piece itself together. And if you look at what the US government is doing with fiscal policy in terms of the money printing, in my opinion, they're literally just avoiding saying this, but that they're printing money in order to devalue the debt that they carry. So, what's 35 trillion in debt if you're taking in 70 trillion in revenue, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're taking in, I don't know the US government budget off the top of my head, but if you take in like $2 trillion a year in revenue, government revenue, but you got 35 trillion in debt, that's bad. It's terrible. But if you're taking in 70 trillion in revenue because the dollar's lost its value and you got 35 trillion in debt, it's a lot more palatable. So that in my opinion is what's happening. Furthermore, and how this all plays together is the invention of tokenization and making illiquid assets liquid or private equity more accessible, there needs to simply be more money in circulation in order for there to even be liquidity for, if you tokenize $30 trillion in assets like Ernst & Young thinks is going to happen in the next 6 years, there's 28.7 trillion. Where's the money going to, where's the actual cash going to be to provide liquidity for that? And so this rabid printing of cash at the same time that we finally have the capability of having liquid assets on the private equity side, I think is really interesting that it's occurring at the same time.
Interesting. There is an element of serendipity to that. I don't know. It's kind of scary.
Well, put your money in assets, right? Like they hold cash. So
yeah, I'm saying in any event, if these are assets that existed previously and were liquid to some extent, and now they're going on chain, so they'll be as liquid as they were previously. The only added difference is, I think, that you have a lot of people who became like, or at least this was true over the last 10 years. I don't know that it will still be true over the next 10 years. I guess it depends on like where the market goes. There were a lot of people who were like crypto rich, and because they had limited ways that they could spend their crypto, so they were a lot less emotional about how they spent it when things became when you were able to acquire certain things in crypto that you wouldn't otherwise have been able to. Somebody might have had $60,000 lying around that they would never have thought to use to buy property in Detroit, but because they had, you know, $400,000 from selling a monkey NFT that they bought for $30. So it's like, the hell with it. What's $60,000 to buy a piece of property in Detroit that I could just do with like the click of a button by syncing my MetaMask to the website? Again, so there's certainly a lot of that kind of like FOMO slash less emotionally attached to my money because it feels like fake in a certain sense. But again, I don't know that trend is going to continue over the next 10 years. And so to the extent that we continue to organize assets and to the extent that crypto is less restricted in how and where you could spend it. So I don't know that we'll continue to see that kind of trend.
Well, I wouldn't even say that's a trend yet.
I mean,
there is a trend of like, oh, I made like stupid money on some like,
so I'll spend it stupid
ape or
also.
penguin NFT. I'll spend it stupidly, sure, for sure. But it's not flowing to RWAs because the RWA industry is nascent. It's like, it's not even nascent, it's pre-nascent. But there's well, for starters, the RWA element is not necessarily just for crypto people. It's for crypto people to diversify their portfolio from something extremely volatile into something where they can provide it's wealth preservation rather than wealth creation in that sense. And so they can diversify into something that will provide them, like fixed income products. And then they know that when they have a family, their net worth isn't going to change on a daily minute, right? But secondly, it's more for the mainstream. And so this is really where your average person doesn't have the ability. The economy is changing. We can all see that in front of our eyes. Money is being devalued. Assets are going up. We perceive it as assets going up in price, but really your money's becoming worthless. And so there's, on top of that, you've got decades of regulation that has gate-kept opportunities away from the regular person. And so the only time that a regular person can truly invest into an asset with a small amount of money is in the public markets. And the public markets have shifted as VC dumps onto the retail. So if you look at the first time a retail buyer was able to access Coinbase stock was when Coinbase IPO'd as a direct listing at $100 billion valuation. Your average person, your regular person, never had the ability to have any upside on investing in Coinbase until it was worth $100 billion. And what did it do when it listed? Went down 87% to 13 billion. So public markets have become private equity or VC institutional dumps on the average buyer. So this is why I think people like GameStop is going wild and why crypto is going wild.
Is it still going wild? GameStop?
Like 2 weeks ago, it went nuts. Like the Roaring Kitty had $1 billion portfolio. So to me, this is society violently, non-kinetically, but violently yearning for an opportunity to put their money into something that will hold value or that will gain them value. But the way the regulations are set up today is that it's practically illegal to invest in anything that will make you money, but you can go to Vegas and put $50,000 on red on a roulette table. tokenization is not just for the diversification for the crypto rich who got into ETH early or DeFi summer or NFTs. And all of that was just a recycling of money in the fishbowl, right? People made money on ETH or ICOs, so they recycled into DeFi when it started springing up. And then they made money in DeFi and they need to recycle it somewhere. And so that's why it went into NFTs. And that goes back to why dApps are reliant on the success of their L1. L1 successes build, I've got a whole nation state theory on this. I'll get to it in a bit. But RWAs are not just for the crypto rich to diversify. They're for your average person to take $1,000, $100, $10,000 and be able to put their money into something more secure that will pay them dividends. RWAs really are the way that that crypto will go mainstream.
But RWAs will be subject to the same fluctuations in global markets as cash will be.
I mean, everything's.
I'm saying if there's inflation and your cash is affected. I'm saying if there's inflation and your cash is affected, then your property is going to be affected the same way. So how do you hedge by investing via crypto?
Well, how do you hedge what? I have to have the counterbalance to that equation.
I'm saying you were talking about the fact that the cost of living goes up, but really it's just because your dollars are becoming worthless, and that people are looking for.
Don't save your money.
So then, how do you hedge against the future?
You take, instead of putting your money into savings, you put them into assets.
Right, and those assets aren't affected by the same inflation.
They are. They go up in value.
They don't really go up in value because.
What's the median home price in the U.S. from today to from 2 years ago?
They go up, but they go up in value in the same way that your dollars, that everything else becomes more expensive because your dollars are worth less.
Okay.
It's not because they're more valuable; it's because your dollars are worth less.
Yes, but that is better than putting into a savings account. If the average price of a home has doubled in the last 3 years, and your savings account's giving you 15% in 3 years.
Right. Okay.
You've beaten the devaluation of the currency.
I agree with you on that one.
Or at least you might not have beaten the devaluation of the currency, but you've beaten the devaluation
of your dollars. Right. If you stay in dollars and you have medial interest rates, then you're not going anywhere. But if you put it in real world assets, the real world assets go up as much as your dollars inflate. So then you haven't lost anything, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, I would actually argue that you've gained a lot because A, you wouldn't be able to put them into anything that would give you any real value, but B, you put them into something that not only goes up in value, probably more likely to go up in value than the devaluation of the dollar, but B, provides you dividend yields on top of the principal appreciation as well.
Okay, so not investment advice, but what have you been doing with your money?
Not keeping
now that you freaked me out and I got to take out all my cash and go and put it into property somewhere.
It was funny. I've been explaining this to my mom that things aren't getting more expensive. She just perceives them as such. And it's like, just because a can of Coke costs $2 today, not $1, it's because your dollar's worth 50 cents. And so you need double the amount to buy the same can of Coke. The Coke didn't change.
Right, you're still making the same amount.
Yeah, there's still shrinkflation where they're taking a liter and turning it into 900 milliliters, but that's a way for them to kind of offset the rising cost by giving you less for the same thing. I mean, look, again, this is not a matter of financial advice. People ask me or asked, and I've answered it. What will we need with tokenization? Will we need financial advisors anymore? Will we need brokers? And the short answer is yes, of course, because your average person doesn't want to sit here and track everything. They're not accustomed to it. They don't have the background for it. They don't have the education to manage their financial futures. And that's very true, right? Your average person wants to go home, wants to get a good job, go home, take care of their family, watch a game on Sunday or a race, and enjoy their lives. So I do think we're still going to see we're going to see financial advisors, but they're just going to be using different forms of access to assets. So that's when it comes to it. I mean, look, I don't want to scare the living hell out of the community of I thought it was funny this element of hyper Bitcoinization, as I've had these talks with the Yalla Bitcoin founders, of everything's going to go to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going to be skyrocketing and yada, yada. these conversations I've had with them were before the money printer of COVID. And if you think about how much money's in circulation, like Bitcoin's going to $1 million, not necessarily because Bitcoin holds value. It's probably going to go to $1 million because the dollar's worthless and you'll just need wheelbarrows of them to buy something. Look, this past Shabbat, actually, at Friday night dinner at one of the rabbis' houses, I was asked, like, oh, so are you one of those types to put your bed under your mattress? Which is a really funny story I can tell you about.
To put your bed under your mattress?
Sorry,
your
to put your money under your mattress, your cash. Yeah.
I was like, how do you put your bed under your mattress?
No.
How do you not put your bed under your mattress? Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that was really funny.
You wouldn't have cash.
Exactly. I looked at him and I was like, dude, I work in crypto. I minimized my amount of cash as possible. But yeah, we're gonna be in a place where instead of saving $1,000, you'll buy $1,000 of an RWA, and as much as even if that pays you 10%, which is a high yield, that's 10% more than you had last year. And eventually you'll build your little mini portfolio of assets. And eventually we're gonna get to a place where we have so many assets tokenized on chain. Imagine a world with 1,000, 10,000 assets on chain. We've been ideating this idea in house, but you're gonna get platforms, something that we would like to build, that allow for your regular person to become a portfolio manager, where he goes out and says, I'm going to put together a portfolio of Western European hotels because I think they're going to beat like North American hotels. And so you're going to create this digital ETF, this basket of assets, where he goes and takes $1 million, buys up in different percentages a bunch of different RWA tokens of hotels in Western Europe, and puts them into a vault.
Into an ETF.
Bundles them into an ETF in a smart contract vault, issues, Yitzy West Europe Hotel Token 1. The ownership of that token represents the assets and the principal appreciation, the assets of that vault. You could burn that token to redeem the assets in that vault, for example. And then you as the creator, as the portfolio manager, may or may not have access to manage that vault. However, you'll earn the secondary trading fees from that portfolio token. So you'll earn a cut of the profits and the secondary trading fees. Now we've given you, it's basically taking like how social media made people into content creators. Tokenization is going to be able to turn people into financial management creators. And you'll be able to track the performance of Yitzy or Hernan or anybody else that decides to put it together. And then if you think about that, now let's say you're a hotshot kid from I don't know, from a bad neighborhood or from a third world country, but your analysis is spot on. You'll be able to create a vault that says this vault, according to smart contract, will buy these assets if someone else puts money into it to fund me to buy these assets. So you can a kid in India who's a crack shot analyst can borrow $10 million from someone who's got that cash on chain. The kid in India can't actually withdraw that money because it's in a smart contract. And the person that funds those assets into the vault shares the revenue streams off of his earnings from putting that together. So you're looking at creating entirely new, tokenization, AI, everyone's worried about losing jobs. It's a changing economy. It's a changing world. You're looking at not necessarily the destruction of jobs, but new opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
my kid may never own an asset that's not digital.
Well, that's not a digital representation.
Correct. For my bar mitzvah, I got Disney stock as a physical paper share.
You still have it?
Now it's a novelty. No, I sold it in college. I needed the money in college, so I sold it.
Smart move. Wow. Okay. So I want to stop there because I like that positive note. You were freaking me out with the whole, the world is going to shit. I had this guy in the podcast last week, Professor Ilan Alon. He's a global economist, and he was also talking about how the world is going to end. And I was like, God, I can't with you guys. And I gotta throw away all my cash and buy more Bitcoin. But that was a very
all-time high. Look at the price of gold.
I know. I want to get some digital representations of gold. That's what I want to get my hands on right now. There's an AGX token, a whole bunch of others.
Tether, I think just was that the Tether one? I think Tether just.
I didn't see Tether, but I saw a whole bunch. Somebody just added me to a WhatsApp group called Peraka Zahav, which is all about crypto gold investments. So, I got to do a little bit of learning, and I'll get back to you. But yeah, definitely got to get my money out of cash and out from under my mattress and into some representations of real world assets?
It's a small market out there, and it is really growing. Everything we're doing, we've got almost $200 million worth of RWAs lined up for Mavryk that we're going to be tokenizing and putting on chain. So I'll end with this note. You asked me like what we're doing that's different than the rest of the market. We're taking a different approach to building a layer one, treating it as a nation state economy rather than a VC pump and dump. When we start off at the get-go, we're going to be giving our users, essentially citizens, right, the constituents, the ability to control their financial freedoms on chain by either buying up hotel tokens or single family homes, leveraging against that, and then in their non-custodial wallet, earning revenue each month, earning dividends each month. So you can imagine in 2-3 years time, when there's a few hundred RWAs tokenized on chain, you'll be able to have a wallet, a portfolio that you control solely that pays you every month.
Amen. I'll drink to that.
Well, coffee, but
Here's to a Mavryk tomorrow. Thank you very much, Alex. This was fantastic. People are listening and they want to find out more about Mavryk or about you. What's the best way to find you?
That's why I put my the Mavryk Twitter handle as my username the chat. So if you take a look at Mavryk Network on Twitter, Mavryk Dynamics, Maven Finance, you can actually go play with Maven Finance on testnet right now. I'll give you a little bit of alpha. We haven't announced it, but for those who watch this, you'll be able to go and play with that and borrow and provide data to oracles, etc. Talk to us on Twitter. We're a very open team. The whole point is transparency and integration into a digital commonwealth on chain. Yitzy, thank you for having us, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.